Welcome back to Tech for Climate Action TV with me, Ralph Cochrane. Now, if you're listening to this as a podcast, you might like to know that you can also see our guests and, of course, me in the studio on our YouTube channel. Or if you're watching the video, you might like to know that you can listen to this on all your favourite podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple, and Amazon. Now, on to this week's episode. We are covering DC Climate Week. It's something we're really excited about. This is the first time it's happened, and with over 100 events, it promises to be something pretty spectacular. If you're interested in all things climate tech, policy, nature, water, all of it, you can see and hear from some of the experts in the DC area. And I'm delighted to welcome two of the co-organisers of DC Climate Week, C'Pher and Vid. Welcome.
We're excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Now, I should also say that Tom and Simon from the Tech for Climate Action team have helped to organise the Policy Day at DC Climate Week. But C'Pher, tell us a little bit about the background, and also, when is it?
So DC Climate Week is April 28th through May 2nd, 2025. We started with an idea about 9 months ago and built the movement to get to where we are today with over 100 events happening, thousands of attendees, all happening here in DC.
All of you have done an incredible job. I just wonder, what's the story behind DC Climate Week? Why now, and why are you doing this?
DC is the center of policy, and we also have a large funding atmosphere here. And we have some of the world's most renowned international development banks, nonprofits, NGOs that are at the tip of the spear for climate action and sustainability and environmental sustainability. And so it just made sense. We said, let's bring the community together. Let's validate this by talking with individuals that are running incubators, accelerators, are also working in the international development space to make a DC Climate Week happen here. And it really is about shining the spotlight on all of the organizations, from the local groups like KC Trees to the internationally renowned groups like WRI and World Wildlife Fund and other groups that are based in here in DC. We wanted to give a stage for all of these amazing experts, especially at a time when we know that climate action is really gaining a lot of momentum.
Very true, and we're really excited to be supporting you. I noticed as well that the organisation is quite clever. There's a hub each day, and I think the idea is that any of the events that are taking place take you about less than 10 minutes to walk to. So that's also a great idea. But coming to you, Vid, what highlights are you really looking forward to?
Monday, our hub's going to be climate tech and innovation. And that day is going to be at the new Bloomberg Center, which is the old museum for anyone that's been in the DC area for a while. And those are going to be some really high-packed sessions. Essentially, some sessions might include lightning talks with hard tech founders, for example, but also financing mechanisms for early stage startups and the whole sort of climate technology sphere. The next day, on Tuesday, our main hub is going to be at the MLK Library, and that's going to be really focused on policy and advocacy. And we'll definitely chat more about this, but we're partnering with a group called Climate Tech for Action, and they are an amazing group and part of the reason why we're on this podcast today. So we're just huge fans of the work they're doing, and we're really looking forward to continuing the partnership. They are experts on the policy side of things, and we wanted to combine forces. And then on Wednesday, we have climate finance and economy, and that will be focused at International Square. And then on Thursday, we'll have Nature Day. And Friday, actually, we'll have two events. One will be called Mobility and Water, and the other Urban Development as well. So it's going to be a jam-packed schedule during that week. But really, these hub events are meant to be like the cornerstone of like, here's what's happening this day. But also, there's so many other participating events happening throughout the week. So there's hub programming and then participating events. And these are 100 plus events that are grassroots organized by other organizations and so on moving forward.
It's just incredible how many events there are. But let's give a quick shout out to the website. So if people want to find out more, where do they go?
Just go to dcclimateweek.com. There's going to be two call to actions right now, which is view events or add an event. And then also in the about page, it just shares more about who's kind of behind the scenes. Me and C'Pher are only a small sliver of the amazing volunteers that are putting this all together. So dcclimateweek.com is the best way to start.
And just talking to you both before we came on air, I know that some of the events, in fact, many of the events, are already oversubscribed. There's been an incredible reaction to DC Climate Week. Just tell us a little bit about how you're managing the demand.
Yeah, we're really inspired by the momentum the community already has to support climate initiatives. Each day is actually already oversubscribed at each of the hub locations. And how we ensured inclusivity for each of the days is by having a lottery system to make sure that we have a broad swath representative of the DC community attending each of the days. So there's still time to attend not only the hub events, but those 100 plus events that are happening by participating organizations. And some of the pieces that I wanted to highlight of not only at the hub locations, but at those participating events is we have everything from panel discussions to tours to hikes to nature walks. Some of the ones that I'm personally really excited about, we have the Daikin Sustainability and Innovation Center right on Pennsylvania Avenue. They're opening up their innovation center, hosting tours to really get a behind the scenes look of how heat pumps work. They have ones that are focused on the innovation side of heat pumps and some of the other technologies that they produce, but they also have policy focused tours to talk about how policies have changed, not only in DC and the US, but globally. Another event that I'm really, really excited about, and this is the architecture and design nerd in me, we have the American Institute for Architects. They're actually hosting a hard hat tour of their newly renovated headquarters, which was, I believe it was designed in the 1970s, and they've renovated it to be net zero. And so that's like a really cool behind the scenes look where they actually bringing in the architecture firm, the engineering firm to walk through and get a behind the scenes look of how a 1970s building was then rehabbed, renovated, and made to meet the needs of the current situation.
There's an amazing org called Compost Crew. They have actually a pilot with the DC government to get compost from households. And then there's actually a tour of their facility of like what happens to the compost when you've submitted it essentially and they pick it up from your doorstep, which I think would be really, really fun. There's another community called Uptop Acres. They actually are creating urban farms on the top of roofs in DC, and they're hosting a happy hour as well as an urban farming event as well. And then there's also a partner of ours, Golden Triangle. They're doing basically, it's one of the first LEED cities in the world that they've created, and they're doing a block sort of tour of like everything they've done. You'll go through pollination gardens, but also look at LED buildings and so on. So anyway, what we're really trying to do with these events, it's yes, we have these hub programming focus areas with panels and really great discussions and amazing speakers, but we'll also have these side activation events that get the people outside and activated in the local community, which we think is really important.
I totally agree, Vid. It's fantastic that you're involving the local community, and it seems like all levels of organisation in DC are getting involved. I want to come on to something called LEAD, which if you're not from the US, you might not be familiar with. This is the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. It is a global standard in green building certifications. And C'Pher, I know you've got an interest in this area, but just tell us a little bit about what's going on in DC when it comes to LEAD.
So DC itself was the first LEED certified city globally. And then you have the individual business improvement districts that Vid was mentioning, like Golden Triangle. They just received platinum LEED certification for the commitment to be really environmentally friendly. Interestingly, DC has the most, I guess, profitable or highest rewarding solar renewable energy credits for homeowners that put solar on the roofs. From a policy perspective, they have Climate Ready DC initiative. They have wildlife plans. DC has 38% canopy tree cover, which is really, really high for as an urban area as DC actually is. And that's due to a lot of the work of our partners like KC Trees that are going to be speaking and having some pop-up exhibits throughout DC Climate Week. From an innovation and technology side, I think we're still at the early curve in DC itself, but on a more macro scale in the US, I'm sure we've all seen this report that for the first time ever, renewables were a higher contributing factor to the US grid than fossil fuels just this spring. And so that's a really important kind of tipping point where you're starting to see the economic case. It's not just about green premiums anymore, but now we're seeing the true economic benefit of net new technologies on the renewable side, and then more investment in some of the longer term technologies that are coming online.
Yeah, first of all, I think what's really important is to discuss like what a unique place DC is, right? There's the global influence, right, with the world banks and so on. Then there's also national influence here in the U.S. being kind of the capital of the United States, and then there's that local influence too, like the local DC government and the amazing initiatives that they have going on as well. At the end of the day, I think we want to be in a world, right, where we do not depend on policy for these solutions to win outright on the economic case, right? And so the cost curve of solar, for example, has been dramatic in the last decade, and the deployment of solar has been astronomical compared to other new generation power sources on the grid in the U.S., as well as batteries. The long duration energy storage is still a little bit away, but it's coming, and the cost curve is also going on a very similar trajectory with solar. But of course, there's up and coming technologies that need some support, right? Like waste to value initiatives, for example, or geothermal, or critical minerals for batteries too. There's just still a lot of nascency in the space in terms of the value chain, and the uncertainty this administration brings makes it really, really hard to set up the right value chains for creating the impact that's needed for our economy to transition off of fossil fuels and onto more cleaner energy sources.
Yeah, we're certainly living in interesting times, but also I would point out that quite a few innovative tech companies were started in periods of downturn and recession. So it's not all doom and gloom. I just wondered as well, I think I'm right in saying that you have day jobs. This actually isn't your main job running DC Climate Week. Just tell us a little bit about what you're working on.
I'm one of the co-founders of a company called GridVolve. We help independent system operators as well as power gen companies navigate their strategy and innovation, and ensure that they are deploying net new technologies that help with resiliency, reliability, and ultimately sustainability for the grid. And some of the pieces why I'm really excited about DC Climate Week in this role is because we get to build a better and more cohesive ecosystem here in DC that can help bridge some of the knowledge gaps where if you're sitting at a large organization, sometimes you're not as in touch with the technology and innovation that's happening at the forefront that maybe ARPA-E has funded at the very beginning, or maybe they received a CBIR and it's coming online, but things are moving so much faster that typically what would have taken 20 years previously, now it's down to 5 years or 3 years as we're seeing the cost curves of long duration energy storage, battery storage come online faster. That's something that now the ISOs, the independent system operators, and other power generation companies are really having to look at and make sure that they're planning for to meet the needs of the grid. And I think one more piece that's really, really important that we're looking at for the future of DC Climate Week, but also what I sit and spend a lot of time with in my day job, is how AI is affecting the future of the grid, but then also broadly speaking, climate-based initiatives. So there's a lot of talk about the energy intensivity of AI, which is there. It's creating a massive, load demand. Um, and so we have to meet that with the power gen. But the other piece is that it's ultimately unlocking is more efficiency. So able to do long range transmission planning for the grid much faster, shorten interconnection queue times to actually gain these efficiencies and massive amount of productivity. And that's not just happening on the grid, but I've talked with so many different founders and organizations that are applying net new AI mapping tools for um, helping with nature-based solutions to accelerate and come up with even faster, better ways to sequester carbon, to map migratory patterns of birds, and understand how nature is adapting to this net new reality as climate has is changing, and how we can think about the better future that we want to create. So that's where I sit day to day, really at the intersection of strategy, technology, innovation for the energy sector.
In a world long, long ago, both C'Pher and I actually worked at the same organization. So we used to work at this, I say, idea to pre-seed incubator called SeedSpot. And it was actually my first job out of college. And so it's been really, really cool to see our relationship continue to thrive beyond that role at SeedSpot. But we're still in very similar spheres. C'Pher is very much on like the utility grid innovation side of things. I'm more a little bit broader swath. My background's in venture capital, and I do a lot of like climate tech investing. So investing in entrepreneurs that are trying to build this future that we all want to live in. And while the grid is definitely a component, but we also think about circular economy, deep decarbonization of steel and cement as well, and many other adaptation, for example, and resilience too. So my passion areas is at the intersection of entrepreneurship actually and community. And so entrepreneurship is kind of this focus of supporting and doing everything I can to make these entrepreneurs and make an impact on the world, because all of the world's progress depends on these unreasonable visions for a better future. And then also on the side, I outside of DC Climate Week and when the Inflation Reduction Act got passed in DC, I just felt like no one was celebrating, and I decided I was like, let's just text some friends and grab some drinks and celebrate this amazing accomplishment from the policy front of things. And Seaver was one of the first people that have joined that group, and that group's evolved now to like a monthly climate professional meetup in DC. The organization is called Climate DC. And so I'm also a founder of Climate DC, and we're closely working with DC Climate Week of how do we make sure this week-long activation also becomes a year-long activation for our partners, but everyone else in the DC area. So it's been a ton of fun to continue building community, but also be supporting the entrepreneurs that are really moving this world forward.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, getting everybody involved is so important. And that brings me on to challenges. So I can hear from both of you working in different parts of the ecosystem, but you're both facing a certain amount of frustration. I just wonder what some of the big challenges are at the moment for the organizations that you're talking to.
People are realizing that there's a lot more patient capital needed for companies that are working on climate. It doesn't really fit the venture capital model very well, only because, like, typically the venture capital model is they want to make a return in 10 years, right? Which is a very fast growth period. But some of these technologies need a lot of capital to start, get over the first of a kind financing gap, and so on. And so I think there's a little bit of a reckoning happening in the venture capital industry of like, is climate actually a venture capital asset class, and is it more of a project finance, debt financing asset class, right? Meanwhile, AI is like taking storm, and all these apps are getting extreme users, right? And so there's a little bit of tension in the industry in terms of where does climate fit in the financing ecosystem.
Yeah, organizations are facing a massive amount of uncertainty due to policy, but also supply chain constraints that are really coming together to affect their business models in a way that we've not foreseen in years. At a time where load growth is skyrocketing and the future demand for energy is only growing faster. Um, the foundational challenge of uncertainty is something business leaders from for-profit, nonprofit, and even community-based organizations are not sure how to respond when there is so much uncertainty in the world around them. When you have supply chain constraints for critical minerals being threatened, that are the foundational level for the electric vehicles, for long duration battery storages, and others. This is a huge challenge for business leaders to actively plan for. So if we can bring individuals together, my concept and one of the pieces that we work on, both at DC Climate Week, but also in my day-to-day job, is bringing individuals together from disparate fields to talk about how we overcome this uncertainty and create opportunities of more certainty to then address the challenges that we're seeing in this current day and time.
Yeah, I can just imagine the strain on people at the moment. And it's so important to have this outlet where you can talk to others within the community and the ecosystem and also just bounce ideas around. But let's move on to success. So I'm sure there are some companies and organizations that you've come across where you've thought, wow, that's incredible. Just tell us about some of the success stories that you've heard.
Yeah, I mean, I would say at least recently, some of the biggest successes are in alternative, what I would call alternative clean firm power. So there's been a lot of funding and progress on the geothermal front. Fervo is a company that's doing really well. They've gotten a contract with, I believe, Google, and then also Zenzakar is another company in the geothermal space. Quaise Energy is more deep geothermal, but basically what these orgs are trying to do is like, how do we tap into the heat below us that's all the time, and how do we have help use that heat to power big, massive loads on the grid? So that's been a really great success story for sure. And then I would say on the other side of things, there's this company called Ravel that I am personally such a big fan of. They are on the circular economy side of things. They actually are recycling textiles, which is a huge problem. There's just a lot of waste from textiles as fast fashion increases, but it's really, really hard to recycle them, especially the blended fibers that is, 80% polyester, 20% elastane. It's really comfortable, and it's a huge hit on the market, but it's really, really hard to split apart those fibers and recycle. It takes a lot of energy, or if you mechanically recycle it, then it also it devalues the actual fibers in the thread. And so they found a really amazing process to purify recycled textiles, and they're doing it at a very nice clip in terms of a scale that is at price parity for virgin polyester, for example. So suppliers can buy straight from this recycler instead of virgin at almost close to price parity, which is a very sort of big key for what I look at when I'm evaluating what's happening out there is like, can you compete on the economic level? Once you can compete on the economic level, that's where true scale happens. And so when I think of like successes, I always think of like, how are these industries and these technologies trying to lever the change, but not have a green premium compared to the incumbents on the market. And so those are at least two examples that come top of mind. How about you, Seifer?
one of the companies that I've recently seen that I'm really excited about, and they're scaling up really quickly, is a company called gridstrong.ai. They're focusing on a really unique problem that plagues majority of power generation organizations as well as ISOs, which is the time for interconnection queue and doing those interconnection studies. So by leveraging AI, their tool enables um, the time to decrease from months and months and months to a much shorter time period um, to actually conduct that interconnection study. And it's usually a very intense study, but if we can leverage the efficiencies gained by AI to shorten the interconnection queue to actually demonstrate the affordability to ratepayers, aka to the homeowners and everyone else that's connecting to the grid, we're going to be able to unlock the next new wave of affordable, clean energy. So that's one company that I'm really excited about. It's at the earliest, it's at a relatively early stage. Another company, and this is an organization that's a partner of DC Climate Week, and Kieran, the CEO of Arcadia, is a board member. So I'm really excited about the success of Arcadia and the innovation that's been happening with their technology platform to help corporations and enterprises more effectively plan their energy costs and demand and make sure that it's coming from clean sources as well. And this is a really, I think, a powerful story for DC itself too, because it does take place at the intersection of policy, technology, and those overlapping aspects are where companies in DC can really shine. So Washington, DC is a policy town. Energy sector is a policy, really policy driven industry, given the how public utilities are defined. You also have you have FERC and you have NERC and you have all these other regulatory and monitoring bodies that make sure that ratepayers are being protected and that we're building the most sustainable grid that we can in the most cost efficient way as possible. And so having Arcadia based here in DC is a really powerful example of what can happen when you can harness and understand policy, but also understand how to build a technology company. And so at DC Climate Week, I know we're going to be hearing Kieran is one of the speakers that's going to help kick us off for the week. And so we'll be hearing quite a bit more about the success of Arcadia.
Well, guys, I think you've created something incredible that will have a real lasting impact. And oh my word, was it needed. So, the chance to meet up with like minded people, to talk, to listen to experts, to workshop, to maybe come up with some new innovative ideas, just incredible. And I wish you every success. But I want to find out as well what you think the future holds. What will be the lasting impact that you hope for?
Yeah, I think DC Climate Week is really coming at this from a umbrella perspective of how do we build a bigger tent, make a bigger pie. And so we're looking to transform DC into a a bigger, a broader, a more collaborative community that addresses climate action. We know that, look, in a recent study done by George Mason University and Yale, over 70% of the population in the US believes that climate change is real. It is a bipartisan issue. It is a issue that is fundamental for our generation and future generations to address. And by bringing all the different policymakers, stakeholders, international development banks, and other organizations that are based here in DC together, we hope to harness that energy to find unlikely allyship amongst both sides of the aisle, amongst for profits and nonprofits coming together to address what is largely the most pressing issue in the world today, which is climate change. And as we look forward, we hope that DC Climate Week becomes this first one, the first of many, and built for the community by the community. And this first year, by being all volunteer led with great partners, we know that this can be self sustaining for years and years to come to support what we all need: hope.
There's so much talent within the climate arena. Something we're hosting during DC Climate Week is the National Job Fair with Clean Energy for America. We have over 1,000 people signed up, amazing booths of folks that want to hire this incredible talent. And C'Pher mentioned this, but just the broadening of the tent, right? We need more and more people coming in and bringing their talent to the climate arena because this problem is massive and it touches every single industry out there. So my, vision, if everything goes to plan, is that there's just so many more people engaged, and there's just more connections and more vision and more cohesiveness towards the vision that we're all trying to build, which is ultimately a world we all want to thrive in, and live together in harmony, but also sustainably with the Earth's natural resources as well. And so this is just a small sliver of the amazing work of all the climate weeks around the world. New York City Climate Week, San Francisco Climate Week, London Climate Week. There's so many out there. And so we're just part of this broader movement of bringing together cohesiveness and a larger umbrella for these activations to happen. And so we are absolutely humbled by all the support, all the sold out events moving forward. And we're excited for all the conversations to come.
I think just listening to you both is inspiring, and a big thank you to all of the co-organisers, because I know there's a big team behind DC Climate Week. It's incredible what you've achieved, and I'm looking forward to seeing just what happens and also the impact. Now, if you'd like to meet our team, Tech for Climate Action, we'll be there on Tuesday. That's Policy Day at the Martin Luther King Memorial Library. If you enjoyed this video or podcast, if you're listening to my dulcet tones, please hit subscribe, like, and tell a friend. We'll be back soon, but for now, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Vid and to C'Pher from DC Climate Week.
Thank you, Ralph.
This was fun. Thank you.